The blood hit the floor at 2:58 a.m., and nobody moved, except her. Ava Bennett's hands were already gloved, already reaching for the crash cart before the monitor even flatlined. Around her, 5 doctors stood frozen, staring at monitors, at each other, at anything but the 19-year-old kid dying on the gurney. The attending physician had his phone out. The resident was flipping through a tablet. Someone muttered something about waiting for the trauma surgeon. Ava didn't wait. She ripped open the intubation kit, called out drug dosages in a voice that didn't shake, and locked eyes with the nearest doctor. Move or help. Pick one. Through the glass wall of the trauma bay, Dr. Marcus Holloway, chief of emergency medicine at Northvale Medical Center, stopped mid-stride. He watched the chaos inside with the detached curiosity of a man who'd seen it all. Then his eyes landed on the woman in scrubs who shouldn't have been calling the shots. "Who the hell is that?" he asked the nurse beside him. "New night shift nurse, Ava Bennett." Holloway frowned. "Why is everyone listening to a nurse?" Inside the bay, Ava's voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Epi, 1 milligram now. Bag him faster. Watch the pressure. Someone get me a central line kit or he's dead in 90 seconds. The kid's chest rose. The monitor beeped. Once. Twice. He lived. Ava stepped back, her hands steady, her face unreadable. Around her, the doctors blinked like they'd just woken up. One of them opened his mouth to say something. Ava was already walking away. Toy. If you want to know how a woman nobody believed in became the only reason an entire emergency room didn't collapse, if you want to see what happens when the person everyone underestimated turns out to be the one holding all the cards, then stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can go. Northvale Medical Center sat on the edge of the city like a fortress that had seen better days. 3 stories of beige concrete, flickering fluorescent lights, and the kind of worn-down exhaustion that came from too many patients and not enough staff. The emergency room was the worst of it, a revolving door of trauma, overdoses, heart attacks, and people who had nowhere else to go. Night shifts were a special kind of hell. The veterans called it the pit. The new hires called it a lot of things, most of them unprintable. Ava Bennett had been there for 2 weeks, and already she knew she didn't belong. Not because she couldn't do the work. She could. She'd done worse under conditions that would make most of these doctors cry. But she didn't belong because no one wanted her there. Not the attending physicians who barely glanced at her name tag. Not the residents who treated her like a walking set of hands. Not the charge nurse who assigned her to the jobs nobody else wanted. Stocking supply closets, transporting patients, running labs. She didn't complain. Complaining was a waste of oxygen. On her 3rd night, Dr. Samuel Voss, a senior attending with a reputation for being brilliant and insufferable in equal measure, cornered her by the med cart. He had the kind of face that looked perpetually annoyed, like the world owed him something and kept coming up short. "You're the new one," he said. It wasn't a question. Ava nodded, her hands busy restocking saline bags. "Let me give you some advice." Voss leaned against the cart, arms crossed. "This isn't nursing school. You don't get points for initiative. You don't get to make calls. You do what you're told, when you're told, and if you have an opinion, you swallow it. Got it?" Ava looked at him. Her expression didn't change. "Got it." Voss seemed disappointed, like he'd been hoping for pushback so he could crush it. "Good. Stay in your lane." He walked away. Ava went back to stocking. Across the room, another nurse, Katie Lynn, mid-30s, sharp eyes, and the kind of tired smile that came from surviving too many shifts, leaned over. "Don't take it personally. Voss treats everyone like garbage. Except the residents. He treats them worse." Ava shrugged. "It's fine. You're awfully calm." "I've had worse bosses." Katie raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you work before this?" Ava's hands paused for half a second. "Everywhere." "Bom, scheiß Sapons." It wasn't exactly a lie. She had worked everywhere, just not in the way Katie imagined. Field hospitals in war zones. Makeshift clinics in collapsed buildings. Triage tents where the only rule was save who you can and don't look back. She'd done 3 tours, patched up soldiers while mortars landed close enough to feel in her bones, and learned that hesitation killed faster than bullets. But she didn't talk about that. Talking didn't change anything. Katie seemed to sense the wall going up. She didn't push. "Well, welcome to the pit. It's a mess, but it's our mess." Ava smiled faintly. "Thanks." The first real test came 4 days later. It was just after midnight. The ER was quieter than usual, a lull that felt more like a held breath than actual peace. Ava was checking vitals on a patient in Bay 3 when the doors exploded open and chaos poured in. 2 gurneys, both critical. A man in his 50s with a steering wheel embedded in his chest. A woman in her 20s with a skull fracture and a blood pressure dropping faster than anyone wanted to say out loud. Behind them, the paramedics were shouting updates. Car versus semi-truck. Head-on collision. 3rd patient DOA on scene. Dr. Voss appeared, snapping orders like he was directing traffic. "Trauma 1, take the male. Trauma 2, female. I want x-rays, labs, and a CT on both. Move." The residents scrambled. Ava moved toward Trauma 2 without thinking. Voss blocked her path. "Supply room. We need more IV kits." Ava blinked. "You've got a critical patient. I've got doctors. I need supplies. Go." She went, not because she agreed, because arguing would take longer than just doing it. By the time she got back, Trauma 2 was a disaster. The patient was seizing. The resident, a guy named Parker, who always looked like he was one bad shift away from a breakdown, was fumbling with an airway kit. A nurse was calling out vitals that kept getting worse. Nobody was talking to each other. Everyone was talking at once. Ava set the IV kits down and watched for 3 seconds. That was all it took. Parker was using the wrong size tube. The monitor wasn't set to the right lead. Someone had hung the saline bag too low for gravity to do its job. She stepped in, quietly. No announcement. Just moved to the head of the bed and swapped out Parker's airway tube for the correct one. Her hands were steady. She didn't ask permission. Parker looked up, startled. "What are you—" "Wrong size." Ava's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You'll collapse her trachea." He stared at her, then at the tube. His face went red. "I had it under control," he muttered. "Sure." Ava adjusted the monitor leads, and suddenly the vitals made sense. The woman's oxygen saturation was climbing. The seizing slowed. Parker's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for help." "I know." Dr. Voss swept in, took one look at the now stable patient, and nodded approvingly at Parker. "Good work, doctor." Parker didn't correct him. Ava didn't say anything either. She just stepped back and returned to her corner. Katie caught her eye from across the room. She mouthed 2 words. "What the hell?" Ava shook her head slightly. It didn't matter. The patient was alive. That was the only scoreboard that counted. But something shifted after that. Not in a good way. Over the next week, Ava kept showing up, kept doing her job, and kept being invisible. Except she wasn't. Not really. People noticed. They just didn't like what they saw. Dr. Voss started assigning her the worst tasks. Bedpans, discharge paperwork, cleaning spills. He never said it out loud, but the message was clear: know your place. The residents ignored her. A couple of them made jokes when they thought she couldn't hear. "Nurse knows best," one said, laughing. Another muttered something about backseat drivers. Even some of the other nurses kept their distance. Not because they didn't like her, because associating with someone Voss had marked was bad for your career. Ava took it all without a word. She'd been through worse. Way worse. Then came the night everything changed. It started with a phone call to the charge nurse's desk. Katie answered, her face going pale as she listened. She hung up and immediately hit the overhead intercom. Mass casualty event. Multiple vehicle pileup on the interstate. ETA 6 minutes. All hands? Prep trauma bays 1 through 5. This is not a drill. The ER exploded into motion. Doctors barking orders. Nurses hauling equipment. Residents looking like they might throw up. Ava was restocking a crash cart when Voss stormed past. "Bennett, you're on triage, front door. Sort them as they come in." Triage, the front line, where you decided who lived and who waited. It was the kind of assignment that could break someone if they hesitated, if they got it wrong. Ava nodded once. Got it. She walked to the ambulance bay doors and waited. Her heartbeat was steady. Her hands weren't shaking. She'd done this before, under mortar fire, with half her supplies missing and twice as many casualties. This was bad, but it wasn't the worst thing she'd ever seen. The first ambulance screamed in. Ava stepped forward. A paramedic jumped out, rattling off details. Male, mid-40s, crush injury to the pelvis, BP's dropping. He's maybe 10 minutes from shock. Ava cut him off. Trauma 1. Move. She pointed. The paramedic didn't argue. Second ambulance. Female, early 20s, head trauma. GCS of 8. Trauma 2. Now. Third, fourth, fifth. They kept coming. Ava stood in the middle of the storm, directing traffic like a conductor, her voice clear and sharp and impossible to ignore. A resident ran up to her, wild-eyed. We're out of space. Where do I put this one? Ava looked at the patient, assessed, calculated. Hallway. He's stable. Monitor him every 3 minutes. If he crashes, you yell. But protocol says, protocols for when you have room. We don't. Move him. The resident moved. Dr. Voss appeared, his face flushed and furious. What the hell do you think you're doing? Ava didn't look at him. Another ambulance was pulling in. Triage, cut, like you told me. You don't give orders to residents, then you do it. She stepped aside, gesturing to the chaos. Be my guest. Voss opened his mouth, closed it. Another gurney rushed past, and he had to move or get run over. He shot Ava a look that could have melted steel. She didn't flinch. Inside the ER, it was a war zone. Blood on the floors, alarms screaming, patients crashing faster than the teams could respond. Dr. Voss was in Trauma 1 trying to stabilize the guy with the crushed pelvis. It wasn't going well. The man's pressure kept dropping. Voss was yelling for blood products, for more hands, for someone to do something. Ava walked in. She wasn't assigned there. She didn't care. She scanned the setup, saw the problem in 2 seconds. The IV line was kinked. The blood wasn't flowing. A simple fix, a deadly oversight. She reached over, straightened the line. The blood began to flow. The man's pressure stabilized. Voss stared at her. I didn't call for you. I know. Ava turned to the resident assisting him. Push another unit. Watch his airway. If he starts to swell, you'll need a crick kit. The resident nodded, wide-eyed. Voss's face turned purple. Get out of my trauma bay. Ava left. Walked into Trauma 2. Same story, different problem. A young woman seizing on the table, the team panicking, nobody taking charge. Ava stepped in. Hold her head. Someone get me diazepam, 5 milligrams. You, bag her, slow and steady. Stop freaking out. She can feel that. One of the nurses looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Who put you in charge? Nobody. Ava's voice was quiet, calm. But if you want her to live, do what I say. The nurse hesitated, then did it. The woman stopped seizing. Her vitals steadied. The room exhaled. An EMT who'd been standing in the corner, watching, waiting, stepped closer. He was older, graying at the temples, and his eyes were locked on Ava's hands. The way she moved, the way she didn't waste a single motion. I've seen that before, he said quietly. Ava didn't respond. Combat triage, the EMT continued. You're military. The room went still. Everyone turned to look at her. Ava pulled off her gloves, dropped them in the trash. Used to be. What branch? She met his eyes. Army, field medic, 3 tours. The EMT nodded slowly. That explains a lot. One of the residents, a woman named Torres, stepped forward. Wait, you were deployed? Yes. And you didn't think to mention that? Ava shrugged. Didn't seem relevant. Not relevant. Torres's voice climbed. You've been letting us treat you like you don't know what you're doing, and you were literally saving lives in war zones? Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was standing right there in front of them. Every patient she'd touched tonight was alive. Dr. Voss shoved his way into the room, his face a storm. What is going on in here? Torres pointed at Ava. She's been running triage better than half the attendings. And we just found out she's a combat medic. Boss's eyes narrowed. I don't care if she's a 4-star general. She's a nurse. She does not make clinical decisions without supervision. She just saved 3 people while you were busy yelling. Torres shot back. Voss's face went white, then red. Get out! Ava looked at him. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she nodded once and walked out of the trauma bay. Katie caught up with her in the hallway. Ava, wait. I'm fine. You're not. Voss is going to file a report. He's going to try to get you fired. Ava stopped, turned. Her expression was unreadable. Let him try. Katie stared. You're not even worried. I've been shot at, Katie. A pissed-off doctor doesn't scare me. Before Katie could respond, the intercom crackled to life. Code Blue, Trauma 3. Code Blue, Trauma 3. Ava's head snapped toward the sound. Without a word, she turned and ran. Katie ran after her. Ava, you can't. They told you to leave. Ava didn't slow down. She hit the doors to Trauma 3 and froze. A kid, maybe 16, lying on the table, chest split open, a surgeon's hands buried in his ribcage. The monitor was screaming. The kid's heart had stopped. The surgeon, a man named Dr. Callahan, one of the best in the hospital, was fighting to restart it manually. His hands were shaking, sweat dripped down his face. Come on, Callahan muttered. Come on, damn it. Nothing. Ava stepped forward. Let me try. Callahan looked up, his eyes wild. What? Let me try. Her voice was steady. You're exhausted. Your hands are shaking. Let me try. You're a nurse. I'm a combat medic who's done this under fire. Let me try. For a single stretched second, Callahan didn't move. Then he stepped back. 30 seconds. That's all you get. Ava moved in, placed her hands exactly where they needed to be, pressed, counted, felt for the rhythm. The room held its breath. The monitor beeped. Once, twice. The kid's heart started again. Callahan stared at her, his mouth slightly open. How did you... Ava stepped back, her hands bloody. Experience. She walked out of Trauma 3, through the hallway, and into the locker room. She sat down on the bench, her hands still shaking now, and closed her eyes. Behind her, the door opened. She didn't turn around. Bennett? It was Dr. Marcus Holloway, the chief. The man who'd been watching from the glass earlier, the man who'd asked why everyone was listening to a nurse. Ava stood, wiping her hands on a towel. Sir? Holloway studied her. His expression was hard to read. I just got a very interesting report from Dr. Voss. He wants you removed from the ER. Ava nodded. I figured. He also just watched you restart a 16-year-old's heart after his best surgeon couldn't. She said nothing. Holloway stepped closer. Why didn't you tell anyone what you were? Would it have mattered? He didn't answer right away. Then, maybe not, but it matters now. Somewhere in the ER, an alarm started blaring again. More patients, more chaos. The pit never stopped. Holloway glanced toward the sound, then back at Ava. Get cleaned up, then get back out there. This isn't over. Ava splashed cold water on her face and watched the blood spiral down the drain. Her hands had stopped shaking, but the adrenaline was still there, humming under her skin like a live wire. She dried off, pulled her hair back, and walked out of the locker room without looking in the mirror. Mirrors didn't help. The ER was still a circus. Gurneys lined the hallways. Family members crowded the waiting room, crying or shouting or just staring at nothing. The overhead lights flickered. Somewhere a phone was ringing, and nobody was answering it. Katie was at the nurse's station, buried in paperwork, her eyes bloodshot. She looked up when Ava approached. You're back? Yeah. Boss is looking for you. I know. Katie hesitated. He's got witnesses. 3 residents willing to say you overstepped. He's building a case. Ava reached for a patient chart. Let him. You're not even a little bit scared? Of what? Getting fired? Ava flipped the chart open. I've had worse days. Katie stared at her like she was trying to solve a puzzle. You really don't care, do you? Ava looked up. Her voice was quieter now. I care about the patients. The rest is noise. Before Katie could respond, Doctor Holloway appeared at the edge of the station. He didn't say anything, just jerked his head toward the conference room. Ava set the chart down and followed. The conference room was small, windowless, and smelled like stale coffee. Holloway closed the door behind them and leaned against the table, arms crossed. He didn't sit. Neither did Ava. "Tell me about your service record," he said. Ava met his eyes. "What do you want to know?" "How many tours?" "3. "Where?" "Kandahar, Mosul, Fallujah." She said the names like they were items on a grocery list, flat. No emotion, just facts. Holloway's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. "What did you do?" "Field medic, trauma stabilization, mass casualty triage, whatever needed doing." "You see combat?" Ava's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Yes." "How much?" She didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated. The truth was that she'd spent 3 years in places where the only certainty was that someone was going to die, and your job was to make sure it wasn't everyone. She'd pulled shrapnel out of soldiers while mortars landed close enough to taste the dirt. She'd held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding and lied to dying kids that help was coming. She'd made calls that kept her awake at night and would probably keep her awake for the rest of her life. But she didn't say any of that. "Enough," she said. Holloway studied her. "Why didn't you go into medicine? You could have been a doctor." "Didn't want to." "Why not?" Ava looked at him. "Because I don't care about the title. I care about the work." Holloway was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened. "Voss wants you gone. He's filing a formal complaint with hospital administration. Says you violated chain of command, overstepped your scope of practice, and endangered patients." Ava didn't flinch. "And what do you think?" "I think you saved 4 lives tonight that wouldn't have made it otherwise." He paused. "I also think you pissed off one of the most powerful doctors in this hospital, and that's going to have consequences." "I can handle consequences." "Can you handle being blacklisted?" Holloway's voice was sharp now. "Because that's what Voss will do. He'll make sure you never work in another ER in this state." Ava's expression didn't change. "Then I'll work somewhere else." Holloway shook his head. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest." "Probably both." For the first time, Holloway almost smiled. Almost. "Get back to work. And Bennett, try not to save anyone else without permission, at least for the next hour." Ava left the conference room and walked back into the ER. The chaos had calmed slightly, but it was the kind of calm that felt temporary, like the eye of a storm. She grabbed a chart and started her rounds. Bay 6. Elderly man with chest pain. Stable. Waiting on labs. Bay 8. Young woman with a broken arm. Sedated. Waiting on X-ray. Bay 10. Middle-aged man with abdominal pain. Not stable. Sweating. Pale. Clutching his side like something inside was trying to claw its way out. Ava stopped. Checked his chart. Checked his vitals. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. She paged the resident on call. Waited. No response. Paged again. Still nothing. The man groaned. "It hurts. God, it hurts." Ava pressed gently on his abdomen. He screamed. Her mind flashed through possibilities. Appendicitis, bowel obstruction, perforation, internal bleeding. Any of them could kill him if they didn't move fast. She hit the call button. "I need a doctor in Bay 10. Now." 30 seconds passed. No one came. The man's pressure was dropping. His skin was going gray. Ava made a decision. She grabbed the ultrasound machine from the hallway, wheeled it into the bay, and powered it up. She'd done this 100 times in the field, quick and dirty scans to see if someone was bleeding out internally. No fancy imaging, no radiologist, just her, a machine, and whatever she could find before it was too late. She squeezed the gel onto his abdomen and ran the probe across his side. The screen flickered. Shadows. Shapes. And then, there. Free fluid in the abdomen, a lot of it. He was bleeding, internally, fast. Ava grabbed the phone and paged the surgical team. "I need a surgeon in Bay 10 immediately. Possible ruptured spleen, free fluid in the abdomen, patients crashing." The voice on the other end was skeptical. "Who's calling this in?" "Nurse Bennett. On whose authority? Ava's grip tightened on the phone. On the authority that this guy's going to die if you don't get down here in the next 2 minutes. She hung up. Didn't wait for a response. Dr. Voss appeared in the doorway, his face already twisted in anger. What the hell are you doing? Ava didn't look up. She was starting a second IV line, preparing fluids. He's bleeding internally. He needs surgery. You don't make that call. Someone had to. Voss stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. You don't get to play doctor just because you stitched up some soldiers. This is a hospital. There are rules. Ava finished securing the IV and finally looked at him. Then follow them. Get him to surgery. Voss's jaw clenched. For a second, it looked like he might physically shove her out of the way. Then the surgical team arrived. 2 residents and Dr. Callahan, still in scrubs from the earlier case. Callahan took one look at the ultrasound screen and swore. How long has he been like this? 5 minutes, Ava said. Maybe less. Callahan turned to Voss. Why wasn't I called sooner? Voss's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Callahan didn't wait for an answer. He turned to his team. Prep him for OR2. We're going now. He glanced at Ava. Good catch. They wheeled the man out. Ava stood in the empty bay, the ultrasound machine still humming beside her. Voss hadn't moved. He was staring at her like she'd just set his car on fire. You're done, he said quietly. I'm going to make sure you never work in medicine again. Ava pulled off her gloves. Do what you have to do. She walked past him, out of the bay, and back into the noise. Katie intercepted her near the supply closet. I heard what you did. That was insane. He was dying. I know, but Voss is going to crucify you. Ava shrugged. Not the first time. Katie shook her head. I don't get you. You act like none of this matters. It doesn't, not compared to the alternative. Which is? Ava looked at her, standing there and doing nothing. Katie didn't have an answer for that. The shift dragged on. More patients, more chaos, more doctors who looked at Ava like she was a bomb waiting to go off. She kept her head down, did her job, and didn't engage. By 4 a.m, the ER had finally quieted. Most of the critical cases were stabilized or transferred. The waiting room had thinned out. The residents looked like zombies. Ava was restocking a crash cart when Dr. Holloway found her again. He looked tired, older than he had a few hours ago. Bennett, my office, now. She followed him down the hallway, past the administrative wing, into a cramped office that smelled like old paperwork and burnt coffee. Holloway sat down behind his desk and gestured for her to sit. She didn't. Voss filed his complaint, Holloway said. Administration's reviewing it in the morning. Ava nodded. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? Holloway leaned back in his chair. I want you to understand that this isn't just about you anymore. Voss has pull. He's been here 15 years. He's got relationships with the board, with donors, with people who decide who stays and who goes. If he wants you out, you're out. Then I'm out. Damn it, Bennett. Holloway slammed his hand on the desk. Why won't you fight for yourself? Ava's voice was steady. Because I'm tired of fighting. The room went silent. Holloway stared at her, his anger draining into something closer to confusion. What does that mean? Ava looked away. It means I've spent 3 years fighting for other people's lives. I'm not interested in fighting for my career. So you're just going to let him win? I'm going to let the patients win. She met his eyes. That's the only fight that matters. Holloway sat back. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, you remind me of someone. Who? Me? 20 years ago. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Before I learned how to play the game. How'd that work out? I'm still here, but I'm not sure I like the person I had to become to stay. Ava didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Holloway sighed. Go home, get some sleep. We'll deal with this tomorrow. Ava left the office and walked back through the ER. It was almost silent now, just the hum of machines and the occasional beep of a monitor. She grabbed her bag from the locker room and headed for the exit. The parking lot was empty except for a few scattered cars. The sky was starting to lighten, dawn creeping over the horizon in shades of bruised purple and gray. Ava unlocked her car and sat down in the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there, staring at the hospital through the windshield. Her phone buzzed. A text from Katie. "You okay?" Ava typed back. "Yeah, liar." Ava almost smiled. "Get some sleep. You too." She set the phone down and closed her eyes. Exhaustion hit her all at once. 3 years worth of it, maybe more. She'd been running for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. To just sit, to breathe. But stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. The faces she couldn't save, the calls she got wrong, the sound of a flatline that came too soon. She opened her eyes and started the car. By the time she got home, a cramped one-bedroom apartment that smelled like instant coffee and old carpet, the sun was up. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. Sleep came fast and dreamless. She woke to her phone ringing. It was just after noon. The caller ID said Northvale Medical Center. Ava answered. "Bennett, this is Sharon from HR." The voice was clipped, professional. "We need you to come in for a meeting at 2 o'clock today." "What's the meeting about?" "The complaint filed against you. Administration wants to hear your side." Ava sat up. "Okay. 2 o'clock, conference room B. Don't be late." The line went dead. Ava stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and made coffee. Strong, black, no sugar. She drank it standing at the counter, staring out the window at the parking lot below. She wasn't nervous. Nervous implied she had something to lose. And the truth was, she didn't. Not really. She'd already lost the things that mattered. Career was just a word. A job was just a paycheck. The only thing that mattered was the work. And the work didn't care about office politics. At 1:30, she showered, changed into clean scrubs, and drove back to the hospital. The meeting was in the administrative wing, a part of Northvale she'd never been to. The walls were cleaner here. The lights didn't flicker. There were framed photos of smiling doctors and grateful patients. Conference room B was at the end of the hall. Ava knocked once and pushed the door open. The room was full. Doctor Voss sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 people in suits. Hospital administration, probably. Dr. Holloway was there too, sitting off to the side, his expression unreadable. A woman with a clipboard sat near the door, taking notes. Voss looked up when Ava entered. He didn't smile. "Sit down." Ava sat. One of the suits, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a face like a shark, leaned forward. "Miss Bennett, I'm Richard Caldwell, Chief Operating Officer. We're here to discuss the complaint filed by Dr. Voss regarding your conduct during last night's shift." Ava nodded. "Okay." Caldwell glanced at his notes. "Dr. Voss alleges that you repeatedly overstepped your scope of practice, ignored direct orders from attending physicians, and performed medical procedures without authorization. Is that accurate?" "Depends on your definition of accurate." Caldwell's eyebrow twitched. "Excuse me?" "I did what needed to be done. If that's overstepping, then yeah, guilty." Voss leaned forward, his voice tight. "You don't get to decide what needs to be done. That's not your job." Ava looked at him. "Then whose job is it? Because last night a lot of people with the right job title were standing around doing nothing while patients died." The room went silent. The woman with the clipboard stopped writing. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Ms. Bennett, we understand you have prior experience as a military medic. But this is a civilian hospital. There are protocols, chain of command, legal liability. You can't just— I can't just what?" Ava's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like glass. "I can't just save people? Is that what you're saying?" Voss slammed his hand on the table. "You're twisting this. I'm stating facts." Ava's eyes locked onto his. 4 people are alive today because I didn't wait for permission. If you want to fire me for that, fine. But don't pretend it's about protocol. It's about ego." Voss's face went red. "You arrogant—" "Enough!" Holloway's voice cut through the room. He stood, his hands flat on the table. "Everyone take a breath." Caldwell looked at him. "Dr. Holloway, do you have something to add?" Holloway glanced at Ava, then at Voss. Yeah, I do. He straightened. Last night was the worst mass casualty event this ER has seen in 5 years. We were understaffed, overwhelmed, and barely holding together. And in the middle of that chaos, Nurse Bennett did something I haven't seen in a long time. Which is? Caldwell asked. She led. Holloway's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. She didn't wait for orders, she didn't hesitate. She saw what needed to happen, and she made it happen. And because of that, every critical patient we received last night survived. Voss shot to his feet. It doesn't excuse anything, Holloway interrupted. It explains it. There's a difference. Caldwell frowned. Dr. Holloway, are you suggesting we overlook a clear violation of hospital policy? I'm suggesting we look at the results. Holloway turned to Ava. How many patients did you directly intervene on last night? Ava didn't hesitate. 6. And how many died? None. Holloway looked back at Caldwell. 0. That's the number that matters. Caldwell's jaw tightened. That's not how this works. Then maybe it should be. The room fell silent again. Voss was trembling with rage. Caldwell looked like he'd swallowed something sour. The note-taker was scribbling furiously. Ava sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Finally, Caldwell spoke. We'll need time to review the specifics. Ms. Bennett, you're suspended pending the outcome of this investigation. You're not to enter the ER or have contact with patients until we've made a decision. Ava stood. Understood. She walked out of the conference room without looking back. The hallway was empty. Her footsteps echoed. Somewhere behind her, she could hear Voss shouting. She didn't care. Outside, the afternoon sun was brutal. Ava walked to her car, got in, and sat there for a moment, suspended. Fine. She'd been through worse. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Torres, the resident. I heard what happened. For what it's worth. Thank you. Ava stared at the message. Then another one came through. From Katie. They're idiots. Don't let them break you. Then another. From the EMT who'd recognized her. You did good, soldier. She set the phone down and started the car. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The hospital loomed behind her, massive, indifferent, unmoved. 3 days later, at 11:47 p.m., Ava's phone rang. She was sitting in her apartment, halfway through a terrible movie, when Katie's name flashed on the screen. Yeah? Ava. Katie's voice was shaking. You need to turn on the news. Why? Just do it. Ava grabbed the remote and flipped to a local news channel. The screen showed Northvale Medical Center, lights flashing, police barricades, crowds of people. The chyron at the bottom read, Breaking, mass shooting at downtown mall. Multiple casualties en route to Northvale. Ava's blood went cold. How many? She asked. They're saying at least 20. Katie's voice cracked. Ava, we're not ready. Half the night shift called out sick. We don't have enough hands. Holloway just put out a call for anyone who can come in. I'm suspended. I don't think anyone cares right now. Ava was already grabbing her keys. I'm on my way. She hung up, pulled on her shoes, and ran for the door. As she drove toward the hospital, the streets were chaos, sirens everywhere, people running, news helicopters circling overhead. The radio was flooded with reports. 20 victims. Maybe 30. Active shooter, still at large. Ava's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd been here before, different country, different war, same nightmare. When she pulled into the hospital parking lot, it was pandemonium. Ambulances lined up like a convoy. EMTs were shouting. Family members were crying. And through the glass doors of the ER, she could see the lights, flashing red, over and over. Ava parked, got out, and ran toward the entrance. A security guard stepped in front of her. No unauthorized personnel. I'm a nurse here. Name? Ava Bennett. He checked his tablet, frowned. You're listed as suspended. I don't care. People are dying. The guard hesitated. Then he stepped aside. Go. Ava ran through the doors and into hell. The ER was a slaughterhouse. Blood pooled on the floor in dark, spreading lakes. Gurneys lined every available inch of space, hallways, waiting rooms, even the supply closets. The air smelled like copper and gunpowder and fear. Monitors screamed from every direction. Someone was crying. Someone else was shouting for O negative. A child sat in the corner, covered in blood that wasn't hers, staring at nothing. Ava stepped into the middle of it, and her brain snapped into combat mode. Training took over. Emotion went into a box. She scanned the room in 3 seconds and made her assessment. Triage had collapsed. Patients were being treated in random order. The most critical weren't being prioritized. They were being ignored because nobody wanted to make the call on who lived and who didn't. Doctors were scattered, working alone, overwhelmed. There was no coordination, no chain of command, just chaos feeding on itself. Katie spotted her from across the room and ran over, her scrubs already soaked in blood. "Thank God you're here. Where's Holloway?" "Trauma 1. He's trying to run the show, but we're drowning." Ava didn't wait. She walked straight to the center of the ER and raised her voice. Not a shout, just loud enough to cut through the noise. "Everyone stop!" Heads turned. A few people kept working. Ava raised her voice again. "I said stop." This time the room went quiet. 30 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Some confused, some angry, some desperate. Dr. Voss appeared from Trauma 2, his face twisted in fury. "What the hell do you think you're—" "Shut up." Ava's voice was flat, cold. "We don't have time for your ego." Voss's mouth fell open. Before he could respond, Ava turned to the rest of the room. "We're doing this wrong. Triage is broken. Half of you are working on patients who can wait. The other half are avoiding the ones who can't." She pointed to the far corner where 3 gurneys sat unattended. "Those 3 are dying right now, while we waste time on broken arms and concussions." A young resident, couldn't have been more than 26, stepped forward. "Who put you in charge?" Ava looked at him. "Nobody. But if you've got a better plan, say it now." Silence. "That's what I thought." Ava turned to Katie. "Get me a whiteboard and markers. Now." Katie ran. Ava turned back to the room. "New system. We're triaging by color. Red tags, immediate life-threatening. They go first. Yellow tags, urgent but stable. They wait. Green tags, minor injuries. They get sent to the waiting room. Black tags." She paused. "We don't have time to work on the dead." One of the nurses, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, spoke up. "We don't use that system here." "You do now." Katie returned with the whiteboard. Ava grabbed a marker and started dividing the room into zones. Trauma bays 1 through 3, red tags only. Bays 4 and 5, yellow tags. Everything else gets triaged in the hallway. I want 2 people on triage at the door. Assess, tag, direct. No exceptions, no debates. She turned to Voss. "You're on Trauma 1. His face went purple. "I don't take orders from—" "Then get out." Ava's eyes didn't leave his. "Because right now, you're either helping or you're in the way. Pick one." For a second, it looked like Voss might actually hit her. Then Dr. Holloway appeared in the doorway, his surgical gown covered in blood. He looked at Ava, then at the whiteboard, then at the room full of stunned staff. "Do what she says," Holloway said quietly. Voss stared at him. "Marcus, you can't be serious." "I'm dead serious. She's run mass casualty triage under fire. Have you?" Voss didn't answer. "Then shut up and get to work." Holloway turned to Ava. "You've got the floor. Make it count." Ava nodded once. Then she pointed at 2 nurses near the door. "You and you, triage station. Start sorting." She pointed at the residents standing around looking lost. "You 3, grab the red tags from the hallway and get them into trauma bays. Move." They moved. Ava turned to Katie. "I need a list of available staff, available equipment, and how much blood we've got left. On it. And get someone to clear the families out of the treatment areas. I don't care how much they scream. They can't be here." Katie hesitated. "Ava, some of these people—" "I know." Ava's voice softened just slightly. "But if we're going to save their families, we need space to work. Get them out." Katie nodded and ran. Ava turned back to the room. It was already transforming. The chaos was bending into something resembling order. Not perfect, not smooth, but functional. People were moving with purpose now. The red tags were being prioritized. The yellow tags were being stabilized. The green tags were being cleared. Ava walked to the triage station and looked at the flow. 12 patients waiting, 7 red tags, 3 yellow, 2 green. The math was brutal. She pointed to the first gurney. What's his status? The triage nurse, a guy named Marcus, mid-30s, looked like he'd seen some things, rattled off the details. Gunshot to the chest, entry wound left side, no exit, BP's tanking, oxygen sat in the 70s. Trauma 1. Now. Ava turned to the next gurney. Her? Abdominal wound, bleeding heavily, pressures holding but barely. Trauma 2. This one? Ava looked down. A woman in her 20s, pale, shaking, gunshot wound to the leg, arterial bleed. Tourniquet applied, but it was too loose. Blood was still leaking. Did anyone check the tourniquet? Marcus shook his head. EMTs applied it on scene. Ava knelt down and tightened it. The bleeding slowed, stopped. The woman gasped in pain, but her color started to improve. She's yellow, Bay 4. They kept moving, one after another. Assess, tag, direct. No hesitation, no second guessing. Ava's voice was steady, her hands sure. Her mind running through protocols she'd learned in deserts and mountains and places where hesitation meant body bags. 30 minutes in, the flow started to work. Patients were being sorted faster than they were arriving. The red tags were being stabilized. The trauma bays were humming. Nurses were calling out updates. Doctors were working in sync instead of stumbling over each other. Ava stepped back and scanned the room. Better. Not good, but better. Then the doors burst open and 3 more gurneys rolled in. All red tags. All critical. One of the triage nurses looked at Ava, panic creeping into her voice. We're out of space. No, we're not. Ava pointed to the hallway. Set up a trauma station there. Grab equipment from Bay 5. They just cleared. Move the yellow tags to the waiting room if they're stable. Make space. The nurse ran. Ava turned to the new arrivals and started assessing. First patient, gunshot to the abdomen, conscious but fading. Second, head trauma, unconscious, pupils unequal. Third, Ava stopped. The third patient was a kid, maybe 12. Gunshot wound to the chest. His face was gray, his breathing was shallow, and his eyes, terrified, searching, locked onto hers. Please, he whispered, don't let me die. Ava's chest tightened. For half a second, she was back in Kandahar, holding a dying soldier who looked just as young, just as scared, whispering the same lie she'd whispered 100 times before. You're going to be okay. She snapped back to the present, pushed the memory down, locked it away. You're not dying today. Her voice was steady, calm. She looked at Marcus. Get him into trauma 3. I'm taking this one. But you're suspended. Do I look suspended? Ava grabbed the gurney and pushed it toward trauma 3 herself. The kid's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. She wheeled him into trauma 3. Dr. Callahan was already inside, elbow deep in another patient. He looked up when Ava entered. What have you got? 12-year-old male, GSW to the chest, left side. Breathing's compromised, pressure's dropping. Callahan glanced at his own patient, stable enough for now, and stepped over. He took one look at the kid and swore under his breath. Tension pneumothorax, his lungs collapsed. We need to decompress now or he's gone. Ava was already grabbing the needle decompression kit. I've got it. You sure? Done it 50 times. She positioned the needle between the kid's ribs, found the landmark, and pushed. There was a hiss of air, pressure releasing. The kid gasped, his breathing immediately easier. Callahan nodded. Good. Now we need a chest tube. They worked together, fast, efficient, no wasted words. Ava prepped the site while Callahan made the incision. She handed him the tube before he asked for it. He slid it in, secured it, and stepped back. The kid's oxygen levels started climbing. Callahan looked at her. You just saved his life. Ava didn't respond. She was checking the kid's vitals, adjusting the IV flow, making sure nothing else was about to go wrong. The kid's eyes were still open, still locked onto her face. You're okay, she said quietly. Just breathe. Nice and slow. It hurts. I know, but you're tough. Tougher than you think. The kid's lips trembled. My mom, she was with me. I don't know if she... We'll find her. Ava squeezed his hand. I promise. It was a promise she had no business making, but she made it anyway, because sometimes a lie that gave hope was worth more than a truth that didn't. Callahan stepped closer, his voice low. We need to move him to ICU. Ava nodded. I'll get transport. No, you stay with him. Callahan's eyes met hers. He trusts you. That matters. Ava hesitated, then nodded. They wheeled the kid out of Trauma 3 and through the chaos toward the elevators. The ER was still a madhouse, alarms ringing, people shouting, blood everywhere. But it was organized chaos now. Controlled. Functional. As they passed the nurses' station, Dr. Voss stepped into their path. His face was flushed, his hands shaking. Bennett, you need to step away from that patient. Ava didn't stop moving. No. You're suspended. You have no authority to treat. Then arrest me. Ava kept walking. But I'm getting this kid to ICU first. Voss grabbed her arm. I said step away. Ava turned, and the look in her eyes made Voss let go like he'd touched fire. If you ever put your hands on me again, you'll regret it. Voss stepped back, his face going pale. Around them, the noise of the ER faded. Nurses were watching. Residents were watching. Even some of the patients were watching. Dr. Holloway appeared from nowhere, his voice cutting through the tension. Voss, walk away. She's defying direct orders. She's saving lives. Holloway stepped between them. Which is more than I can say for you right now. Get back to your trauma bay or get out of my ER. Voss's mouth opened, closed. He looked around the room, saw no allies, and stormed off. Holloway turned to Ava. Go, get that kid upstairs. Ava nodded and kept moving. Callahan walked beside her, silent until they reached the elevators. As they waited, he glanced at her. You've got guts. I'll give you that. Guts don't matter if the patient dies. Maybe. But they matter when everyone else is too scared to act. The elevator doors opened. They wheeled the kid inside. As the doors closed, Ava looked down at him. He was breathing easier now. His color was better. His eyes were closing. Stay awake, she said gently. Just a little longer. I'm tired. I know, but you have to stay awake for me. Can you do that? The kid nodded weakly. Okay. The elevator climbed. Ava kept her hand on his wrist, monitoring his pulse. Steady, strong. He was going to make it. The ICU was quieter, cleaner. The nurses there moved with precision, taking the kid from Ava and wheeling him into a private room. A doctor appeared, older, gray-haired, calm. He listened to Callahan's report, nodded, and turned to Ava. You're the one who decompressed him? Yes. Good work. He wouldn't have made it another 5 minutes. Ava didn't respond. She was watching through the window as they hooked the kid up to monitors, adjusted his lines, settled him into the bed. He looked so small, so fragile. Callahan touched her shoulder. We need to get back down. I know, but she didn't move. Not yet. She watched until the kid's eyes finally closed, until his breathing steadied into the rhythm of sleep. Then she turned and followed Callahan back to the elevator. When they returned to the ER, the chaos had shifted again. More patients had arrived. The waiting room was overflowing, but the system Ava had put in place was holding. Red tags were being treated. Yellow tags were waiting their turn. Green tags were being sent home with instructions. Katie intercepted her near the triage station. We've got a problem. What kind? We're running low on blood. O negative's almost gone. A positive's gone. We've got maybe 20 units left total. Ava's jaw tightened. How many patients still need transfusions? At least 15. The math was simple and brutal. They didn't have enough. Get on the phone with every blood bank in the region. Tell them we need an emergency delivery. Now. I already tried. They're all tapped out. The other hospitals hit by the shooter took their reserves. Ava stared at her. Then we're on our own. Katie's face went pale. Ava, if we run out... I know. Ava turned back to the room, scanned the patients, started doing the math in her head. Who could wait? Who couldn't? Who would survive without a transfusion? And who wouldn't? It was the kind of math that kept you awake at night, the kind that left scars. She was about to start making the calls when the ER doors burst open. But this time, it wasn't patients. It was soldiers, 6 of them, full combat gear, led by a man in his 40s with a weathered face and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Ava, and stopped. "You Ava Bennett?" Ava straightened. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Captain Jeff Harrow, National Guard. We got word from Fort Crenshaw that a decorated field medic was working this ER. Someone said you might need help." Ava blinked. "How did you—" "Doesn't matter." Harrow gestured to his team. "We've got medical training, combat triage, field trauma. Tell us where you need us." For the first time in hours, Ava felt something loosen in her chest. "Can you run IVs?" "In our sleep." "Good. We're running low on blood. I need you to stabilize patients who don't need transfusions so we can save what we've got for the ones who do." Harrow nodded. "Consider it done." He turned to his team. "You heard her. Spread out. Find the nurses, get your assignments, and get to work." The soldiers moved like a machine, fast, efficient, no questions. Within minutes, they'd integrated into the ER flow, taking pressure off the overwhelmed staff. Nurses who'd been running ragged suddenly had backup. Doctors who'd been drowning suddenly had help. Ava watched them work, and for the first time since she'd walked through those doors, she let herself breathe. Katie appeared beside her. "Who are they?" "Reinforcements." "From where?" Ava shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm not asking questions." Dr. Holloway stepped up beside them, his face streaked with sweat and blood. He looked at the soldiers, then at Ava. "Did you call them?" "No." "Then how—" "Does it matter?" Ava met his eyes. "They're here. Let them work." Holloway stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay." The next 2 hours were a blur. Ava moved from patient to patient, crisis to crisis, never stopping, never slowing. Her hands were steady. Her mind was sharp. She didn't think about the suspension. She didn't think about Voss. She didn't think about anything except the work. By 3 in the morning, the flow of patients had finally slowed. The last of the critical cases had been stabilized. The red tags were in surgery or ICU. The yellow tags were waiting for beds. The green tags had been sent home. Ava stood in the middle of the ER, surrounded by the wreckage, and finally let herself feel the exhaustion. It hit her like a freight train. Her legs shook. Her hands trembled. She leaned against the nurse's station and closed her eyes. "Bennett?" She opened her eyes. Captain Harrow was standing in front of her, his gear still on, his face still calm. "My guys are packing up. Wanted to check in before we head out." Ava straightened. "Thank you. We wouldn't have made it without you." Harrow smiled faintly. "You would have, but it would have been uglier." He paused. "Word of advice. People like you don't fit in places like this. Too much noise, too much politics. You ever get tired of it? Fort Crenshaw's always looking for combat medics. We'd take you in a heartbeat." Ava almost smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." Harrow nodded once, then turned and led his team out. The ER felt quieter without them. Emptier. Katie appeared beside her, looking like she'd been through a war herself. "I think it's over. For now." Katie looked at her. "You okay?" "No." Ava's voice was quiet, honest. "But I will be." Before Katie could respond, Dr. Holloway's voice cut through the room. "Bennett, my office. Now." Ava's stomach dropped. She glanced at Katie, who just shook her head. "Good luck?" Ava walked through the ER, past the exhausted staff, past the empty trauma bays, and into Holloway's office. He was standing behind his desk, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He closed the door behind her. "Sit." Ava sat. Holloway leaned against the desk. "I just got off the phone with Richard Caldwell. He's very interested in what happened here tonight. I bet. He wanted to know who authorized you to take over the ER during a mass casualty event." Ava met his eyes. "Nobody." "That's what I told him." Holloway paused. "He also wanted to know how many lives you saved." Ava didn't answer. 32. Holloway's voice was quiet. 32 patients came through those doors with red tags. All of them survived. That's a 100% survival rate on critical trauma. Do you know how rare that is? Lucky night. That wasn't luck. Holloway's jaw tightened. That was you, your system, your leadership, your calls. He leaned forward. You saved 32 lives tonight, Bennett. 32 people are going home to their families because you didn't wait for permission. Ava looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. Is there a point to this? Yeah, there is. Holloway straightened. Voss wants you fired. Caldwell wants you investigated. The board wants you gone. Ava nodded. Okay. But I don't. She looked up. Holloway's eyes were hard, determined. I want you to stay. I want you to run trauma protocols. I want you to train our staff. I want you to do exactly what you did tonight, every single night. Ava stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. He pulled a folder from his desk and set it in front of her. This is an offer. Head of Trauma Response. You'll report directly to me. You'll have authority over triage, protocols, and training. You'll have a seat at the table when decisions get made. Ava opened the folder, scanned the first page. The salary was more than she'd ever made. The title was more than she'd ever wanted. She closed it. Voss will never allow this. Voss doesn't get a vote. Holloway's voice was cold. As of tonight, he's being reassigned. The board's opening an investigation into his conduct during the mass casualty event. Turns out several staff members filed complaints about his behavior, including me. Ava blinked. You're serious? I told you, 32 lives. That's the only number that matters. Holloway's expression softened slightly. You don't owe me an answer tonight. Think about it. Talk to whoever you need to talk to. But Bennett, we need you. This hospital needs you. Ava didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, words failed her. Holloway walked to the door and opened it. Go home. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Ava stood, still holding the folder, and walked out of the office. The ER was almost empty now. Just a few nurses cleaning up, a couple of residents finishing paperwork. The chaos had faded into exhausted silence. She walked to the locker room, grabbed her bag, and headed for the exit. As she pushed through the doors into the parking lot, the cold night air hit her like a slap. She stopped, breathed it in, and looked back at the hospital. Somewhere inside, 32 people were alive. 32 families hadn't gotten the worst phone call of their lives. 32 futures that almost ended didn't. Ava's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is the mom of the kid you saved. They told me what you did. I don't have words, just thank you. Thank you for giving me my son back. Ava stared at the message until her vision blurred. She wiped her eyes, shoved the phone in her pocket, and walked to her car. As she drove home, the city lights blurred past. The streets were quiet now. The sirens had stopped. The world was moving on, already forgetting the night that had just happened. But Ava wouldn't forget. She never did. When she got home, she collapsed onto her couch, still in her scrubs, and closed her eyes. Sleep came fast, dreamless. She woke 6 hours later to her phone ringing. The caller ID said Dr. Holloway. She answered. Yeah? Turn on the news. Ava grabbed the remote, flipped to a local channel. The screen showed Northvale Medical Center, but this time the footage wasn't chaos. It was press conference. Richard Caldwell stood at a podium flanked by hospital administrators and Ava sat up. Dr. Voss, in handcuffs, being led away by police. The chyron at the bottom read, Senior Doctor arrested for negligence and obstruction during mass casualty event. What the hell? Ava whispered. Holloway's voice was calm. Turns out, Voss falsified patient records, covered up mistakes. When the board started digging, they found years of complaints that were buried. Last night was just the final straw. Ava couldn't breathe. How did... Justice, Holloway said quietly. Sometimes it actually happens. He paused. Check your email. The board wants to meet with you. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. For what? To make the offer official. The line went dead. Ava set the phone down and stared at the screen. Voss was gone. The man who tried to destroy her career was being destroyed himself. She should have felt vindicated, triumphant, something. Instead, she just felt tired. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Katie. Did you see the news? Holy shit! You won! Ava stared at the message. Won. Like it was a game, like any of this mattered more than the 32 people who were still breathing. She texted back. Nobody won. We just didn't lose. She set the phone down, stood, and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising. Another day. Another shift. Another chance to do the work that mattered. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID was blank. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her pick up. Hello? A voice. Male. Young. Shaking. Is this Ava Bennett? Yeah, who's this? You don't know me, but you saved my brother last night, the 12-year-old kid, gunshot to the chest. Ava's breath caught. He okay? He's awake. He's asking for you. Ava closed her eyes. Tell him I'm glad he's okay. Can you come see him? He won't stop talking about you. He says you promised to find our mom. Ava's chest tightened. She'd made that promise. In the middle of chaos, when lies felt kinder than truth, she'd promised. Did you find her? The line went quiet. Too quiet. No, the voice finally said. She didn't make it. Ava sat down. Hard, the room spun. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You saved him. That's what matters. The voice cracked. But he doesn't know yet. About Mom. And I don't know how to tell him. Ava's throat closed. She opened her mouth. No words came out. Can you come? The voice asked again. Please? Ava looked at the sunrise, at the city waking up, at the hospital in the distance where a 12-year-old kid was asking for the woman who'd lied to him. She grabbed her keys. Ava drove through the morning traffic with her hands locked on the wheel and her mind anywhere but the road. The promise echoed in her head like a drumbeat. We'll find her, I promise. She'd said it without thinking, without knowing. And now a kid was about to learn that the woman who saved his life had lied to him about the one thing that mattered most. The hospital parking lot was already filling up. Shift change, doctors arriving, nurses leaving. The world kept spinning like nothing had happened, like 32 people hadn't almost died 12 hours ago. Ava parked and sat there for a moment, staring at the building. She'd been inside that place for less than a month, and it had already chewed her up and spit her out twice. Now she was walking back in, voluntarily. She got out of the car and headed for the ICU entrance. The lobby was quieter than the ER, cleaner, calmer, designed to feel less like a war zone. Soft lighting, muted colors, a volunteer at the desk who smiled too much. Can I help you? I'm here to see a patient. 12-year-old male, gunshot wound, admitted last night. The volunteer checked her computer. Room 412, 4th floor. Are you family? No. Then I'll need to check if... Tell him Ava's here. He'll know. The volunteer hesitated, then picked up the phone, spoke quietly, hung up. He says to send you up. Ava took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was lined with rooms, each one occupied by someone who'd survived something they shouldn't have. Machines beeped. Monitors glowed. Nurses moved quietly from door to door. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Ava stopped just outside, her hand on the frame, and listened. A voice. Young, male, tired but alive. I told you she'd come. Ava stepped inside. The kid was sitting up in bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, his face pale but alert. Tubes ran from his arms to monitors that beeped steadily. Beside him sat a boy who looked maybe 16, same eyes, same nose. The brother. The kid's face lit up when he saw her. You came. Ava walked to the bedside. Said I would. I knew it. The kid's smile was wide, genuine, unaware. My brother said you might be too busy, but I told him you promised. Ava's chest tightened. She glanced at the brother. He looked back at her with eyes that were already grieving. He knew, and he was waiting for her to do what he couldn't. She turned back to the kid. How are you feeling? Tired, but okay. He paused. They said you saved my life. Well, you saved your own life. I just helped. My mom always said that. She always said we're stronger than we think. His smile faltered slightly. Have you seen her? The nurses won't tell me anything. They keep saying she's in another part of the hospital. Ava's throat went dry. She looked at the brother again. He shook his head once. Not yet. But the kid saw it. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. His smile disappeared. What's wrong? Ava sat down in the chair beside the bed, slowly, deliberately, buying herself seconds she didn't have. What's your name? Ryan. Okay, Ryan. Ava's voice was steady, calm, the same voice she'd used in war zones when she had to tell soldiers that their buddies weren't coming back. I need you to listen to me. Ryan's eyes went wide. No. Ryan. No. His voice cracked. Don't say it. Please don't say it. Ava reached out and took his hand. It was small, cold, shaking. Your mom was hurt very badly. The doctors did everything they could. Ryan pulled his hand away. Stop. Make it, Ryan. I'm sorry. The room went silent. The monitors kept beeping. The machines kept humming. But Ryan's world had just collapsed and nothing else mattered. He stared at her. Through her. His face went blank. Empty. Like someone had reached inside and turned off a switch. You promised, he whispered. Ava's chest cracked. I know. You said you'd find her. I know. You lied. Ava didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Just sat there and took it. Because he was right. She had lied. And now a 12-year-old kid was paying the price. Ryan's brother, his name was Daniel, stood up and put a hand on Ryan's shoulder. It's not her fault. Yes, it is. Ryan's voice was rising now, anger replacing shock. She promised. She looked me in the eye and promised. Ryan, get out. Ryan turned his face away. Both of you, just get out. Daniel looked at Ava, his eyes pleading. She shook her head slightly. Give him space. Daniel nodded and stepped back. Ava stood. I'm sorry, Ryan. I wish I could have done more. Ryan didn't respond, didn't look at her, just stared at the wall like she didn't exist. Ava walked out of the room and into the hallway. The door closed behind her. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Somewhere inside her chest, something was bleeding. Not physically. Worse. Daniel appeared beside her a moment later. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 12 hours. Thank you for coming. I shouldn't have lied to him. You gave him hope. That's not nothing. It is when the hope's a lie. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, he'll come around, eventually. Right now, he just needs someone to be angry at. Ava looked at him. And you? Who are you angry at? Daniel's jaw tightened. The guy who shot her, the system that let him get a gun, the universe. Take your pick. He paused. But not you. You saved my brother. That's all that matters. Ava didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Take care of him. I will. She walked away down the hallway, past the rooms full of people who'd survived the unsurvivable. As she reached the elevator, her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Holloway. Where are you? The board meeting's in 30 minutes. Ava had completely forgotten. She checked the time. 9:30. She had just enough time to get back downstairs, clean herself up, and walk into a room full of people who wanted to decide her future. She took the elevator down to the first floor, found a bathroom, and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a ponytail that had half fallen out, scrubs that were wrinkled and stained with blood that wouldn't wash out. She splashed water on her face, tied her hair back properly, and walked out. The administrative wing was on the opposite side of the hospital, through a maze of hallways that got progressively cleaner, quieter, more sterile. By the time she reached conference room A, it was 2 minutes to 10. She pushed the door open. The room was full. Richard Caldwell sat at the head of the table, flanked by 4 other board members, 2 men, 2 women, all in suits that probably cost more than Ava's car. Dr. Holloway sat off to the side, his expression neutral. And across from him, Ava stopped. Dr. Voss. Still in his hospital clothes, no handcuffs, no police, just sitting there like nothing had happened. Caldwell looked up when Ava entered. "Miss Bennett, please, sit." Ava looked at Holloway. He shook his head slightly. "Not what you think." She sat down at the far end of the table, as far from Voss as she could get. Caldwell folded his hands. "Thank you for coming on short notice. I know last night was difficult for everyone involved." He paused. "Before we begin, I want to clarify something. The arrest you may have seen on the news this morning, that was not Dr. Voss." Ava blinked. "What?" "That was Dr. Samuel Voss's brother, David Voss, a radiologist at Northvale. He's been under investigation for falsifying patient imaging reports to cover up diagnostic errors. The arrest happened to coincide with this morning's news cycle, and the media conflated the two stories." Ava stared. "You're joking." "I wish I were." Caldwell's expression was flat. "Dr. Samuel Voss is not under arrest. He is, however, under review for his conduct during last night's mass casualty event." Voss leaned forward, his face smug. "A review I'm confident will clear me completely." Ava's hands curled into fists under the table. "He tried to stop me from saving patients." "That's your version," Voss shot back. "My version is that you violated protocol, overstepped your authority, and created unnecessary risk." "Unnecessary risk?" Ava's voice was sharp now. 32 people are alive because I didn't wait for you to stop arguing and start working. 32 people are alive because our medical team did their jobs," Voss said smoothly. "You may have assisted, but you were not in charge. You had no authority to take over the ER." Ava looked at Holloway. "Are you hearing this?" Holloway's jaw was tight. "I am." Caldwell cleared his throat. "Ms. Bennett, the purpose of this meeting is not to litigate last night's events. It's to discuss your future at Northvale." "My future?" Ava laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "I thought you already decided that when you suspended me." "The suspension was procedural, Caldwell said. "Standard protocol when a staff member acts outside their scope of practice. Even if it saves lives?" Caldwell didn't answer. Instead, he opened a folder in front of him. "I've reviewed your file. Your service record is impressive. 3 tours, multiple commendations. Field trauma experience that most civilian doctors will never see." Ava waited. There was a but coming. There was always a but. "But," Caldwell continued, "this is not a battlefield. This is a hospital. We have procedures, regulations, legal standards, and last night you violated several of them to save lives. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Caldwell leaned back. "The point is that we cannot have staff members, regardless of their qualifications, acting unilaterally during critical events. It creates liability. It undermines the chain of command. It sets a dangerous precedent." Ava stared at him. "You're more worried about liability than lives?" "I'm worried about both." Caldwell's voice was cold now. "And right now, you represent a significant liability." One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a sharp gaze, spoke up. "If I may?" She looked at Ava. "Ms. Bennett, no one is questioning your skill or your intentions, but Dr. Voss raises a valid point. You acted without authorization. You took control of the ER without consulting the chief of emergency medicine." Ava turned to Holloway. "I did consult him. He told me to make it count." Holloway nodded. "That's true." The woman frowned. "After the fact. The decision to restructure triage was made before Dr. Holloway arrived, because patients were dying while everyone else stood around debating protocol." Voss slammed his hand on the table. "That is a gross mischaracterization. Is it?" Ava's eyes locked onto his. "Because I was there. I saw you freeze. I saw residents fumbling with equipment they didn't know how to use. I saw patients bleeding out because no one wanted to make a call." "You saw chaos," Voss said coldly, "and you exploited it to play hero." Ava stood. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I didn't play anything. I did my job. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine." Caldwell raised a hand. "Miss Bennett, please sit down." "Why? So you can lecture me about liability while people are dying?" Ava shook her head. "I've heard enough." She turned toward the door. If you walk out of this meeting, Caldwell said quietly, you're done at Northvale, permanently. Ava stopped. Her hand was on the doorknob. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned back. Let me ask you something. If your family member came into that ER last night, bleeding out, dying, would you want someone who followed protocol? Or someone who did whatever it took to keep them alive? Caldwell didn't answer. That's what I thought. Ava opened the door and walked out. The hallway was empty, quiet. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard the conference room door open. Footsteps following. Bennett, wait! She stopped, turned. Dr. Holloway was jogging after her, his face flushed. What the hell was that? The truth. You just torched your career. I didn't have a career. I had a suspension and a board meeting where half the people wanted me gone anyway. Ava shook her head. I'm done fighting for a place that doesn't want me. Holloway stepped closer. That's not true. Isn't it? Voss is still here, still untouchable, still protected. Meanwhile, I'm the one being questioned for saving lives. He won't be untouchable for long. Ava looked at him. What does that mean? Holloway glanced back at the conference room, lowered his voice. There's something you need to know. Voss isn't just being reviewed for last night. There's an investigation, a real one, federal. Ava frowned. For what? Medical fraud, insurance kickbacks, falsified treatment records? The FBI's been building a case for months. Holloway's eyes were hard. Last night just gave them more evidence. Ava stared. How do you know this? Because I'm the one who called them. The hallway seemed to tilt. Ava grabbed the wall to steady herself. You what? 6 months ago, I found discrepancies in Voss's patient files. Treatments that were billed but never performed. Procedures that didn't match the documented outcomes. I flagged it to administration. They buried it, so I went over their heads. Ava's mind was racing. Does Voss know? Not yet, but he will. Soon. Holloway stepped closer. The arrest this morning, the media got the story wrong, but they weren't completely wrong. Voss's brother was just the beginning. The investigation's bigger than one radiologist. It's systemic, and Voss is at the center of it. Ava didn't know what to say. For weeks, she'd been fighting a man who seemed untouchable. And now she was finding out that he'd been rotting from the inside the whole time. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. Holloway paused. And because I need you to stay. Why? Because when Voss goes down, and he will go down, this hospital is going to need someone who actually gives a damn about patients. Someone who doesn't play politics. Someone who does the work. He met her eyes. That's you, Bennett. Ava looked away. I just walked out of a board meeting. So walk back in. They don't want me. Caldwell doesn't want you. The rest of the board is split. And the staff, Holloway's voice softened. The staff wants you. Katie, Torres, Callahan, even some of the residents. They saw what you did last night. They know what you're capable of. Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then, what about the offer? Head of trauma response? Still on the table, if you want it? And if I don't? Holloway shrugged. Then you walk away. Find another hospital, another ER, another fight. He paused. But I don't think you will. Why not? Because you're not a quitter, you're a fighter, and this fight isn't over. Ava looked back at the conference room door. Through the narrow window, she could see Caldwell talking, Voss leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, looking smug. She thought about Ryan, about the 32 people who were alive, about the soldiers who died in her arms because she didn't have enough supplies, or enough time, or enough hands. She thought about the work, the only thing that mattered. I need a coffee, she said finally. Holloway almost smiled. There's a machine down the hall. Lead the way. They walked together, past the administrative offices, past the clean walls and the polished floors. The coffee machine was old, loud, and produced something that barely qualified as coffee. Ava drank it anyway. What happens now? She asked. You go back in there. You apologize for walking out, and you listen to what they have to say. And if they fire me anyway, then you walk out with your head up. But I don't think they will. Holloway took a sip of his own coffee and grimaced. Caldwell's a bureaucrat. He cares about optics. And right now, firing the woman who saved 32 lives would be terrible optics. Ava set her cup down. When does Voss find out? About the investigation? Could be today. Could be tomorrow. The FBI doesn't exactly send me their schedule. Holloway's expression darkened. But it's coming, and when it does, it's going to be ugly. Good. They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Holloway straightened. Ready? Ava took a breath. No, but let's do it anyway. They walked back to conference room A. Ava pushed the door open. Every head turned. Caldwell looked up. Ms. Bennett, I wasn't sure you'd return. Neither was I. Ava sat back down. But I'm here. Caldwell studied her. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Ava looked at Voss, then at the board members, then at Holloway. Yeah, I do. She straightened. I'm sorry for walking out. That was unprofessional. She paused. But I'm not sorry for what I did last night. I'm not sorry for saving lives. And I'm not sorry for refusing to stand by while patients died because someone was too busy protecting their ego to do their job. Voss's face went red. You have no right. I have every right. Ava's voice was calm, steady. I was there. You weren't. Not where it mattered. One of the board members, a younger man in his 40s, leaned forward. Ms. Bennett, if we were to move forward with the head of trauma response position, what would you do differently? Ava thought for a moment. I'd rewrite the mass casualty protocols, build a training program for field triage, create a system where decisions are made by the people closest to the patients, not the people furthest from the fight. That would require significant restructuring, the man said. I know. And significant buy-in from existing staff. I know that too. The man glanced at Caldwell, then back at Ava. I like it. Caldwell's jaw tightened. This isn't a vote. Maybe it should be. The silver-haired woman spoke up again. Ms. Bennett raises valid points, and her results speak for themselves. Voss shot to his feet. This is absurd. You're seriously considering putting a nurse in charge of trauma protocols? A decorated combat medic, Holloway corrected. There's a difference. It's still inappropriate. The conference room door opened. Everyone turned. A man in a dark suit stepped inside. He had a badge clipped to his belt and the kind of face that didn't smile. Behind him, 2 more agents. Same suits, same badges. The lead agent looked at Voss. Dr. Samuel Voss? Voss's face went pale. Yes? FBI. You're under arrest for medical fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. The room erupted. Board members stood. Caldwell started shouting. Voss was backing away, his hands up, his face a mask of shock and rage. This is a mistake. I haven't done anything. You have the right to remain silent. The agent stepped forward, handcuffs out. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Voss turned to Caldwell. Richard, do something. Caldwell looked away. Voss turned to the board members, to Holloway, to anyone who would meet his eyes. No one did. The agent cuffed him, read him his rights, led him toward the door. As Voss passed Ava, he stopped, looked at her. His eyes were full of hatred. This is your fault, he hissed. Ava met his gaze. No, it's yours. The agents let him out. The door closed. The room went silent. Caldwell sat down slowly. His face was gray. I was not informed. No one was, Holloway said quietly. That's how investigations work. The silver-haired woman cleared her throat. Well, that was dramatic. She looked at Ava. Ms. Bennett, I believe we were in the middle of a discussion about your future. Ava blinked. You still want to talk about that? More than ever. The woman smiled slightly. We just lost our senior attending. We're going to need someone to fill the void. Someone with experience. Someone who can lead under pressure. She paused. Someone like you. Caldwell looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just sat there, staring at the empty chair where Voss had been. Holloway leaned forward. The offer stands, head of trauma response. You'll report to me. You'll have full authority over protocols, training, and staff assignments. He paused. What do you say? Ava looked around the table, at the board members who were watching her with something that looked almost like respect. At Holloway, who'd gone to war for her without her knowing, at the empty chair where the man who'd tried to destroy her had sat just minutes ago. She thought about Ryan, lying in a hospital bed, hating her, about the 32 people who were alive, about the work that never stopped. "I'll do it," she said, "on one condition. Which is, I don't work for this board, I work for the patients. And if that means breaking protocol to save a life, I'll break it, every time." Caldwell opened his mouth to object. The silver-haired woman raised a hand. "Agreed." Caldwell stared at her. "Susan." "Agreed, Susan," Susan repeated. She looked at Ava. "Welcome to the team, Ms. Bennett." Ava nodded once. "Thank you." The meeting ended. The board members filed out, talking in hushed tones about Voss, about the investigation, about what came next. Holloway stayed behind, waiting until the room was empty. "You okay?" he asked. "Ask me tomorrow." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He paused. "For what it's worth, you earned this, not because of Voss, because of what you did." Ava looked at him. "What happens to the patients Voss was treating? If he was falsifying records, we're reviewing everything. It's going to take months, maybe years." Holloway's expression darkened. "But we'll find them, and we'll make it right." Ava nodded. "Good." She left the conference room and walked back through the hospital. The hallways were busy now, shift change in full swing, patients being transferred, families visiting. The world kept moving. As she reached the ER, Katie intercepted her. "Is it true?" "Which part?" "All of it. Voss arrested, you taking over trauma, the entire universe flipping upside down." Ava almost smiled. "Yeah, it's true." Katie grabbed her and hugged her, hard. "I knew it. I knew you'd win." Ava pulled back. "Nobody won, Katie. We just survived." "Close enough." Katie grinned. "Come on. Torres is buying coffee. Real coffee, not the hospital sludge. You're coming." "I can't. I need to—" "You need to take a breath." Katie grabbed her arm. "Doctor's orders. Well, nurse's orders. Same thing." Ava let herself be pulled toward the break room. Inside, Torres was there, along with 2 other residents and a couple of nurses. They looked up when Ava entered. Torres stood. "Is it true? Voss is gone?" Ava nodded. The room erupted. Cheering, clapping. Someone whistled. Torres grabbed Ava's hand and shook it. "Thank you, seriously. That guy was a nightmare." "I didn't do anything. The FBI did." "You survived him. That's more than most people can say." Torres grinned. "And now you're in charge. That's poetic justice if I've ever seen it." Ava accepted the coffee someone handed her. It was hot, strong, actually tasted like coffee. She drank it and let the moment wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Daniel. Ryan's asking for you again, when you have time." Ava stared at the message. She'd expected anger, hatred. A door slammed in her face. She texted back, "On my way." She set down the coffee and headed back to the ICU. The 4th floor was quieter now. Visiting hours had started. Families clustered in doorways, talking in low voices. Room 412's door was open. Ava knocked softly. "Come in," Daniel called. Ava stepped inside. Ryan was still in bed, still pale, still bandaged, but his eyes were clear, focused. "You came back," he said quietly. "Yeah." Ryan looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry for what I said before." Ava shook her head. "You don't owe me an apology." "Yeah, I do." Ryan's voice cracked. "You saved my life, and I yelled at you. That's not fair." Ava sat down in the chair beside his bed. "You were angry. You had every right to be." "I'm still angry." Ryan looked up, and his eyes were full of tears. "But not at you. At everything else." Ava reached out and took his hand. "That's okay. Be angry for as long as you need to be." Ryan nodded. They sat in silence for a moment. Then, "Daniel says you're in charge now. of the ER. Something like that. That's good. Ryan smiled faintly. Maybe now people will actually get saved. Ava's throat tightened. I'll do my best. I know you will. Ryan squeezed her hand. Thank you for everything. Ava stood. Get some rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. Promise? This time Ava didn't hesitate. Promise. She walked out of the room and back into the hallway. Daniel followed her. He's going to be okay. Eventually. I know. Daniel paused. So are you. Ava looked at him. How do you know? Because you're still standing. Ava didn't have an answer for that, so she just nodded and walked away. As she rode the elevator back down to the first floor, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Holloway. Just got word. The FBI wants to interview you about Voss, tomorrow at 9. Don't worry, you're a witness, not a target. Ava stared at the message. Tomorrow, another fight, another battle. The work never stopped. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't walking into it alone. The elevator doors opened. Ava stepped out into the lobby and looked back at the hospital one more time. Somewhere inside, Voss was sitting in a cell. 32 people were recovering. Ryan was learning to live without his mother. And Ava was still standing. She walked out into the daylight, got in her car, and drove home. Tomorrow would come. And when it did, she'd be ready. But tonight, she was going to sleep. Ava didn't sleep. She tried. Laid in bed for 3 hours staring at the ceiling while her brain replayed the last 48 hours on an endless loop. Ryan's face. Voss in handcuffs. The 32 people who were alive because she didn't wait for permission. The one woman who wasn't. At 4 a.m, she gave up, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table and watched the city wake up through the window. Streetlights flickered off. Cars started moving. Somewhere out there, people were starting their days with no idea that their lives could end before lunch. She thought about the interview with the FBI, what they'd ask, what she'd say, whether any of it mattered now that Voss was already in custody. Her phone buzzed. A text from Holloway. Meeting at 8 a.m. before your FBI interview. My office. Important. Ava typed back. What's it about? Just be there. She showered, dressed in clean scrubs, and drove to the hospital. The sun was just starting to rise, pale light spilling over the buildings, turning everything gold. It should have felt hopeful. New beginning, fresh start, all that garbage. Instead, it just felt like another day. The hospital parking lot was almost empty. Ava parked and walked inside. The ER was quiet, night shift winding down, day shift trickling in. A few nurses at the station, a couple of residents looking half dead. Katie was there, refilling a med cart, and she looked up when Ava passed. You're here early. Couldn't sleep. Katie nodded like she understood. Big day. Something like that. Ava kept walking. Holloway's office was in the back corner of the administrative wing, small, cramped, filled with stacks of files and a coffee maker that looked older than Ava. He was already there, sitting behind his desk, and he wasn't alone. Richard Caldwell sat across from him. So did Susan, the silver-haired board member from yesterday. And standing by the window, looking uncomfortable, was a man in his 50s wearing a cheap suit and an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Holloway gestured to the empty chair. Bennett, sit. Jag ska se. Ava sat. What's going on? Caldwell cleared his throat. This is Gerald Pritchard, Hospital Legal Counsel. He paused. We need to discuss the fallout from Dr. Voss's arrest. Ava looked at Pritchard. What fallout? Pritchard shifted his weight. Dr. Voss's actions have exposed Northvale to significant legal liability. Patients whose treatments were falsified may file lawsuits. Insurance companies may demand reimbursement. The state medical board is launching an inquiry. And we need to prepare a response. Part of that response involves identifying staff members who may have witnessed irregularities in Dr. Voss's conduct. Ava's eyes narrowed. You want me to testify? We want you to cooperate, Mud, Caldwell corrected. The FBI will ask you questions today. Your answers will become part of the official record. We need to ensure that your testimony aligns with the hospital's position. Which is? That Dr. Voss acted alone, that his actions were not sanctioned by administration, that Northvale Medical Center is committed to transparency and accountability. Ava stared at him. You want me to lie? We want you to be careful, Pritchard said quickly. This investigation could destroy careers, including yours. How? You violated protocol during the mass casualty event. You acted without authorization. If the FBI decides to scrutinize your actions, if they conclude that you contributed to the chaos, I didn't contribute to anything except saving lives. That's not how lawyers see it. Pritchard leaned forward. Ms. Bennett, I understand you believe you did the right thing, but the legal system doesn't reward good intentions. It punishes mistakes. And right now, you're a liability. Ava looked at Holloway. He was staring at his desk, his jaw tight. Marcus, are you hearing this? Holloway didn't answer. Susan spoke up. Ms. Bennett, no one is asking you to lie. We're asking you to be strategic, answer the FBI's questions honestly, but don't volunteer information that could be used against you, or the hospital. Ava stood. I'm not playing games with the FBI. Then you're a fool, Caldwell said flatly, because if this investigation expands, if it starts looking at systemic failures, you'll be caught in the crossfire, and we won't be able to protect you. I don't need your protection. Everyone needs protection, Ms. Bennett, especially people who think they're invincible. Ava walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Let me ask you something. If I testify honestly, if I tell the FBI exactly what happened, and it makes the hospital look bad, what happens to my job? Silence. Ava nodded. That's what I thought. She walked out. Behind her, she heard Caldwell say something sharp, but she didn't stop, didn't look back, just kept walking until she was out of the administrative wing and back in the ER. Katie was still at the nurse's station. She took one look at Ava's face and frowned. That bad? Worse. What happened? Ava shook her head. Doesn't matter. I've got an FBI interview in an hour. I need coffee. I'll get it. You sit. Ava sat. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. She'd spent 3 years in war zones fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. And now she was back in a place where the fight was supposed to be over, and it turned out the enemy was just wearing a different uniform. Katie returned with coffee. Real coffee. Strong. Ava drank it and tried to focus. At 8:45, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Special Agent Claire Mathis, FBI. I'm in Conference Room C. Ready when you are. Ava stood. Katie looked up. You okay? No, but I will be. Conference Room C was smaller than Room A. Just a table, 4 chairs, and a woman in her late 30s wearing a dark suit and the kind of expression that gave nothing away. She stood when Ava entered and extended a hand. Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming. I'm Agent Mathis. Ava shook her hand. Let's get this over with. Mathis gestured to a chair. Please, sit. She opened a folder and pulled out a digital recorder. I'm going to record this interview, standard procedure. You're not under investigation. You're a witness. Anything you say here is confidential unless it becomes relevant to the case against Dr. Voss. Ava nodded. Understood. Mathis hit record. Interview with Ava Bennett, former U.S. Army field medic, current nursing staff at Northvale Medical Center. Date, April 14th. Time, 8:52 a.m. She looked up. Ms. Bennett, how long have you worked at Northvale? A month, give or take. And during that time, did you interact with Dr. Samuel Voss? Yes. Can you describe the nature of those interactions? Ava thought for a moment. Then she told the truth. All of it. How Voss had dismissed her from day one, how he'd assigned her menial tasks, how he'd tried to stop her from treating patients during the mass casualty event, how he'd filed a complaint to have her removed. Mathis listened without interrupting. Took notes. When Ava finished, she set down her pen. Did you ever witness Dr. Voss falsify patient records or billing information? No, I didn't have access to that. Did you ever hear him discuss financial arrangements with patients or pharmaceutical representatives? No. Did you observe any behavior that seemed unethical or illegal? Ava hesitated. Define illegal. Mathis's expression didn't change. Any action that violated hospital policy, medical ethics, or federal law. Ava leaned forward. He tried to stop me from saving patients because it made him look bad. Is that illegal? It's negligent, but negligence isn't a federal crime. Mathis paused. Unless it's part of a pattern. Did you witness Dr. Voss engage in similar behavior with other staff members? I saw him bully residents, ignore nurses, prioritize his reputation over patient care, but I don't have documentation. Your testimony is documentation. Mathis made another note. Ms. Bennett, I've reviewed the hospital's records from the night of the mass casualty event. 32 critical patients, 0 fatalities. That's statistically extraordinary. We had help. National Guard medics showed up. Yes, Captain Harrow's team. Mathis looked up. Did you request their assistance? No, they just appeared. Interesting. Mathis flipped a page. Captain Harrow says he received a call from Fort Crenshaw. Someone told them a decorated combat medic was working the ER and might need backup. Ava frowned. I didn't call anyone. I know. We traced the call. It came from Dr. Marcus Holloway. Ava sat back. Holloway had called in reinforcements, without telling her, without asking permission. Mathis continued. Dr. Holloway also provided us with the evidence that led to Dr. Voss's arrest. Falsified records, billing fraud, a pattern of misconduct spanning 3 years. She paused. He's been cooperating with our investigation for 6 months. Ava's mind was spinning. Holloway had been fighting Voss long before she'd arrived. While she was getting dismissed and undermined, he'd been building a case that would take Voss down for good. Mathis closed the folder. Ms. Bennett, I need to ask you a difficult question. Did anyone from hospital administration ask you to alter your testimony or withhold information during this interview? Ava looked at her. The recorder was still running. This was the moment, the choice. Tell the truth and risk everything, or play it safe and let the system protect itself. She thought about Ryan, about the 32 people who were alive, about the soldiers she couldn't save because the system failed them. Yes, she said. This morning, Caldwell and Pritchard. They told me to be strategic, to avoid volunteering information that could hurt the hospital. Mathis's expression hardened. Did they specify what information? Anything that made it look like the hospital enabled Voss. Anything that suggested systemic failure. And what do you think? Ava met her eyes. I think the system was broken long before I got here. I think Voss got away with it because people were too scared or too complicit to stop him. And I think if you don't fix the system, the next Voss is already waiting. Mathis nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. She reached over and turned off the recorder. Off the record, what you did during that mass casualty event was remarkable. You should be proud. I'm not interested in pride. I'm interested in making sure it doesn't happen again. Mathis stood, extended her hand. We'll be in touch if we need additional testimony. In the meantime, watch your back. Whistleblowers don't always get happy endings. Ava shook her hand. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm just someone who told the truth. In my experience, those are the same thing. Ava left the conference room and walked back to the ER. It was busier now. Day shift in full swing, patients filling the bays, the usual chaos. She stood at the edge of the room and watched. Nurses moving efficiently, residents consulting with attendings. The flow working the way it was supposed to. Katie appeared beside her. How'd it go? Better than expected. That mean you're staying? Ava looked at her. Why would I leave? Katie smiled. Good answer. The day passed in a blur. Patients came and went. Ava worked her shift, triaging, starting IVs, monitoring vitals, normal work, routine work, the kind of work that didn't make headlines but kept people alive. At 3 p.m, Holloway found her in the supply closet. We need to talk. Ava set down the box of gauze she'd been unpacking. About what you told the FBI. You already know what I told them. You were listening. Holloway's jaw tightened. Caldwell's furious. He wants you gone. So fire me. I'm not going to fire you. Holloway stepped inside and closed the door. But you need to understand what you've done. You just made yourself a target. I've been a target since I got here. Not like this. Caldwell has pull. If he decides to bury you, he'll find a way. Ava crossed her arms. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to be smart. Don't give him ammunition. Don't make mistakes. And for the love of... He stopped, took a breath. Don't go rogue again. I didn't go rogue. I did my job. Your job is to follow protocol. My job is to save lives. Ava's voice was quiet, hard. And if protocol gets in the way, I'll break it, every time. Holloway stared at her. Then slowly he smiled. You're going to be a problem, aren't you? Probably. Good. He opened the door. Staff meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. He left. Ava went back to unpacking gauze. The staff meeting the next morning was packed. Every nurse, every resident, every attending who wasn't actively treating a patient crammed into the largest conference room. Ava stood in the back, arms crossed, waiting. Holloway stood at the front of the room. Beside him was Susan. No Caldwell, no Pritchard. Holloway cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know it's been a rough week. Dr. Voss' arrest, the mass casualty event, a lot of changes happening fast. He paused. But I want to talk about what comes next. The room was silent. As of this morning, Richard Caldwell has resigned as Chief Operating Officer. The board voted unanimously to accept his resignation. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ava's eyebrows shot up. Caldwell was gone. Susan stepped forward. The board has also voted to implement a new transparency policy. Any staff member who witnesses unethical behavior from any level of administration can report it directly to an independent review committee. No retaliation. No cover-ups. More murmurs. Louder now. Holloway continued. We're also restructuring trauma protocols. Ava Bennett, where are you? Ava's stomach dropped. Every head in the room turned. She raised a hand. Here. Come up here. Ava pushed through the crowd, climbed the steps to the front of the room, stood beside Holloway, feeling like she was about to be executed. Holloway looked at the room. Ava Bennett saved 32 lives during the mass casualty event. She did it by ignoring protocol, taking command, and making the hard calls no one else wanted to make. He turned to her. And now she's going to teach the rest of you how to do the same thing. The room erupted. Applause. Cheering. A few whistles. Torres was on her feet. Katie was grinning. Even some of the residents who'd ignored her were clapping. Ava stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do with her hands. Holloway raised his voice. Effective immediately. Ava Bennett is head of trauma response. She'll be rewriting our mass casualty protocols, training staff on field triage, and leading the trauma team during critical events. He looked at her. Say something. Ava looked at the room, at the faces staring back at her, people who'd dismissed her, people who doubted her, people who were now waiting for her to lead. She took a breath. I don't have a speech prepared. I'm not good at speeches. She paused. But I can tell you this. I've been in war zones. I've seen what happens when people hesitate, when they wait for permission, when they put protocol over lives. Her voice was steady now, strong. We're not going to do that here. We're going to be fast. We're going to be smart, and we're going to save everyone we can. No excuses. The room went silent, then Torres started clapping again. Slowly, others joined. The applause built until the whole room was on its feet. Ava stepped back. Holloway leaned over. Not bad for someone who's not good at speeches. Shut up. The meeting ended. Staff filed out, talking in clusters. Ava tried to leave but got stopped every 3 feet. Nurses shaking her hand, residents asking questions, even a couple of attendings nodding respectfully. Katie grabbed her arm. You're famous now. I hate it. Too bad. You're stuck with it. Ava finally escaped to the locker room, sat down on the bench and closed her eyes. For a moment, she let herself feel it. Not pride, not triumph, just relief. The fight was over. She'd won. and she was still standing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Ryan's being discharged tomorrow. He wanted me to tell you. Says you should visit before he goes. Ava texted back. I'll be there. That afternoon, she went up to the ICU. Room 412's door was open. Ryan was out of bed, sitting in a chair by the window, looking stronger, healthier, still pale, still bandaged, but alive. He looked up when Ava entered. You came. I said I would. I know, but I wasn't sure. He paused. Daniel told me what you did, how you got promoted, how you're running the ER now. Trauma protocols, not the whole ER. Close enough. Ryan smiled faintly. My mom would have liked that. She always said people who do the right thing eventually get recognized. Ava sat down in the chair beside him. Your mom sounds like she was smart. She was. Ryan's smile faded. I miss her. I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city stretched out below them, cars moving, people living, the world indifferent to individual grief. What happens now? Ryan asked. You go home. You heal. You figure out what comes next. And you? Ava thought about it. Same thing. Ryan looked at her. Are you okay? Like really okay? Ava didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated. She'd won the fight, but the scars were still there. The nightmares. The faces of people she couldn't save. The weight of carrying 32 lives forward while leaving one behind. I don't know, she said finally. But I'm working on it. Ryan nodded. Me too. Ava stood. Take care of yourself, Ryan. You too. She walked out of the room. Daniel was in the hallway, leaning against the wall. Thank you for everything. He's going to be okay. Because of you. Ava shook her head. Because of him. He's tougher than he thinks. Daniel smiled. So are you. Ava didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and walked away. 3 weeks later, Northvale Medical Center held a ceremony in the main lobby. The press was there. Local news cameras, a few reporters, hospital staff lined the walls. Ava stood at the front of the room beside Holloway, wearing clean scrubs and feeling deeply uncomfortable. Susan was at the podium, reading from a prepared statement. Today, we honor the staff members whose actions during the April 13th mass casualty event saved 32 lives. Their courage, dedication, and refusal to accept failure embody everything Northvale Medical Center stands for. She called names, nurses, residents, attendings. Each one stepped forward, received a commendation, shook hands, smiled for the cameras. Then Susan said, Ava Bennett. Ava stepped forward. Susan handed her a framed certificate for extraordinary service and leadership under crisis conditions. Cameras flashed. People clapped. Ava shook Susan's hand and stepped back. Afterward, reporters swarmed her, shoving microphones in her face, asking questions. Ms. Bennett, how does it feel to be a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse. But you saved 32 lives. A team saved 32 lives. I was just part of it. Sources say you took command without authorization. I did what needed to be done. Next question? The reporters kept pushing. Ava kept deflecting. Finally, Holloway stepped in. That's enough. Ms. Bennett has patients to attend to. He pulled her away, through the crowd, out of the lobby. They walked in silence until they reached the ER. You okay? He asked. Fine. You hate this. More than anything. Holloway smiled. Good. Means you're still sane. He paused. The trauma training program starts next week. You ready? No, but I'll figure it out. That's what I like to hear. He walked away. Ava stood in the middle of the ER, watching the chaos swirl around her. Patients coming in, nurses moving fast. The work never stopped. Katie appeared beside her. Big day. Yeah. You going to celebrate? By going home and sleeping for 12 hours. Katie laughed. Boring, but fair. Ava grabbed a chart and got to work. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Patients stabilized, crises averted, lives saved, routine miracles. By the time her shift ended, the sun was setting. Ava walked out to the parking lot, got in her car, and sat there for a moment. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the messages. One from Torres. "You killed it today." One from Katie. "Drinks tomorrow night. You're coming." One from Ryan. "Saw you on the news. You looked uncomfortable. Made me laugh. Thanks for that." Ava smiled, set the phone down, started the car. As she drove home, the city lights blurred past. She thought about the last month, about everything she'd survived, everything she'd fought for, everything she'd lost along the way. She thought about the soldiers she couldn't save, the promises she couldn't keep, the lies she told because the truth was too hard. But she also thought about Ryan, about the 32 people who walked out of Northvale alive, about the system she'd helped dismantle and the one she was building in its place. She thought about the work, the only thing that mattered. When she got home, she didn't collapse on the couch, didn't turn on the TV, didn't pour a drink and try to forget. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop, started writing notes, ideas, protocols, a training program that would teach nurses and residents how to make the hard calls, how to lead under pressure, how to save lives when everything was falling apart. She worked until midnight, then she closed the laptop, stood, and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, people were dying. People were being born. People were fighting battles no one else could see. And tomorrow, she'd be back in the ER, doing the work that never stopped. But tonight, for the first time in years, Ava Bennett felt something close to peace. Not because the fight was over. The fight was never over. But because she'd learned something that 3 years of war couldn't teach her. You don't need permission to do the right thing. You don't need a title or a rank or someone else's approval. You just need the courage to stand up when everyone else sits down, to speak when everyone else stays silent, to act when everyone else hesitates. The system doesn't reward that kind of courage. It punishes it. It tries to break it. But if you refuse to break, if you keep standing no matter how many times they knock you down, eventually the system has no choice but to change. Ava had been dismissed, undermined, suspended, and nearly destroyed. But she was still here, still standing, still doing the work. And that was the only victory that mattered. She walked to her bedroom, set her alarm for 5 a.m. And fell asleep. Tomorrow would bring new crises, new battles, new people who needed saving, and Ava Bennett would be ready. Not because she was a hero, not because she was fearless, not because she had all the answers, but because she knew something most people spend their whole lives trying to learn. The people who change the world aren't the ones with the most power or the biggest titles or the loudest voices. They're the ones who show up, who do the work, who refuse to quit when quitting would be easier. They're the ones who stand in the gap between life and death and refuse to let death win. Ava Bennett had been that person in war zones, in deserts and mountains, in places where hope went to die. And now she was that person here, in a hospital that had tried to break her, in a system that had tried to silence her. She'd survived, she'd won, and she'd done it without compromising who she was. That was the real victory, not the title, not the ceremony, not the applause, but the knowledge that she'd stayed true to herself when it would have been easier to give up. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. To stand, to fight, to save who you can save, and to keep going when the world tells you to stop. Because the work never stops, and neither do the people brave enough to do it.